Good afternoon, everybody. Just wait a minute or two just for everybody to join the call and for audio to connect. We've just got a few more people connecting at the moment. Just bear with us for another moment or two. Brilliant. I have some more people trickling in. But thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hannah Jackson. I'm Head of School Programmes here at New Schools Network, and I'm really happy to welcome you all to today's event on staff wellbeing for free schools. And thank you to our guest speakers today who have joined us to share their perspectives and experiences on this topic. Obviously, this is a topic that has been very widely discussed, both sort of across all sectors and organisations across all industries over the last sort of 18 months, but we're going to try and avoid using the P word too much today, as all of you who have worked in schools as teachers and as senior leaders will know that wellbeing for staff in education has been a particular issue for a long time, sort of before the pandemic, and will continue to be, I'm sure, beyond as well. So we have our three speakers today. Sue Plant, who is the head teacher at John Taylor Free School, a secondary free school that opened in 2018 in Staffordshire. Gary Wilkie, who is the CEO of Learning in Harmony Trust, which is a special school trust based in Newham, and Steve Waters, who is the founding CEO of Teach Well Alliance, and has also recently published a book on cultures of staff wellbeing and mental health. And Sue features as one of the case studies in that book. Please do put your cameras on if you're able to. I think it's always a bit nicer for our speakers to be able to see who they're talking to. I appreciate, obviously, it is late in the afternoon, but if you are able to and your bandwidth can deal with it, please do put those on. If you can remain muted as you're all doing, that would be great. In terms of housekeeping, we are recording today's session, so if you have any questions that you would rather ask anonymously, you can message those to me directly on the chat function as well, but please do pop any questions that come to your mind for our speakers in the chat as we go along. Everyone will be speaking for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions from the floor. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Sue.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. It is great to see faces rather than just seeing the blank screens. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that all right? Can somebody give me a thumbs up or a nod? Great. Well, my name's Sue Plum. I'm head of school at John Taylor Free School, and we opened in 2018. And I'm based in Burton-on-Trent in Staffordshire. We had 210 students in our first year of opening, and now we have 240. So we've just started with our year 10 cohort, which is very exciting. It's come around ever so quickly, having our GCSE students. And we're fortunate to have been in the position where we've been oversubscribed in every year since opening. We're part of the John Taylor Multi-Academy Trust, which is a medium-sized trust with a range of nursery, infant and primary phase and 4 secondary schools. And we've got 3 new free schools in the pipeline, 1 primary, 1 nursery primary and 1 all through school. We're also part of the Teaching School Hub and the Research School at John Taylor. So that just gives you a little bit of context about the John Taylor Free School. So our school is built on these 3 principles, in effect. These are the 3 points that I use when I'm talking to staff, to parents, to students, and it really underpins our approach to staff wellbeing and student wellbeing. And the fact that we're a relationships-focused school where we believe that trust, respect and dignity are absolutely paramount in all connections in our community. We talk about creativity and innovation, and also about the pursuit and the achievement of personal excellence. And that's really the kind of fundamentals about our approach to wellbeing. It's not an add-on, it's not a ad hoc kind of thing that we do every now and again. It really is fundamental to our key principles. And that's really sums up the fact that our people are front and centre. And I would very much argue the fact that we need to look after our staff, and we need to put our staff's needs first, because if we don't look after them, then they can't look after the students in turn. And it also needs to be sustainable. It can't be something that's unmanageable or unwieldy, and it has to run through every aspect of school life. So I'm going to talk through these different strands of school life: the curriculum, development, the autonomy, or the agency that staff have, collective efficacy, our approach to professional learning and review, my view that schools need to be life friendly. Lots of people talk about family friendly, but I think there are many life events that schools need to be aware of, and I'm not sure that I agree with people that say they need to just leave their home life at the gate. I don't think it always works like that. And that trust is absolutely fundamental to all of these things. So if I start with the curriculum, I think this is why people come into the profession. They want to share their love of their subject, and they want to inspire and make a difference to young people. So our curriculum is really exciting. It is really dynamic, and people, our staff, our teachers get to work not just collaboratively within their own teams, but also across school. So nobody's working in isolation. Nobody's doing the same work time and time again. We use SharePoint so that everything is open access, that people don't just squirrel away in their own area on the computer, and that they are sharing it, not just again in their own teams, but with everyone. And I think that makes a huge difference to people's well-being, because they feel like they're not on their own and that they can talk and share. We have collaborative spaces physically in school that staff workrooms are either in one team or a group of teams, depending on the size of the room. And again, that makes for some great conversations where people can support and talk to each other. We do respect the subject expert and know that they're the expert in their field. And that means that we give them time to share that best practice, to make the genuine links of the curriculum right across the piece. So we expect that lessons are structured and sequenced in the order that's right for their subject, but second to that, that they connect and linked with other subjects. And that means that we forge really strong relationships right across the school. And again, that means that people don't feel that they're working on their own. And in terms of well-being, there's nothing worse than feeling like you're isolated. In terms of our approach to marking, we would call it a feedback approach rather than a marking approach. And again, very much about what's right for the subject and what is being delivered at that point in time. I'm not a fan of marking everything that moves. I think that feedback should be appropriate, timely, effective, and then it's up to the subject specialist to make sure that that they take those premises and make it work for their subject and their context. And the key thing for me is that, do the students know and understand where they're at and what they need to do to improve? And if they do, then the feedback is effective. And I think that's been a little bit of a battle for some people, because they're used to some very different approaches to marking. And we've had to work with staff to move forward with that and see that there is a different way. Professional learning is a key part of what we do, and I talk about this in the chapter that I wrote for Steve's book. We have 2 hours of professional learning every week, and that is based on the principle that everybody can improve, not because they're not already great teachers, they really are, but because everybody can be even better. And this time each week is again devoted to reading, research, collaboration, inquiry. And it's not about gimmicks or flash in the pan ideas, about trying new things every week. It's genuine time to embed best practice, to use the research and use the evidence in our school, in our setting, and keep coming back to it and revisiting it so that we can see how effectively we're putting it into place. And when you talk to teachers, they often say that they're short of time. And so that's what we're doing with our professional learning sessions. We're trying to make sure that people do have the time to sit and talk and share and plan. We also have a coaching culture in school, and again that's referenced in the chapter in the book. So we invest time in developing a coaching approach so that people can improve. And what we found is that the coaching approach improves questioning, it improves listening, it builds stronger relationships. And again, that supports well-being, because nobody feels like a failure, because making mistakes is okay, it's perfectly normal, everybody's human, everybody makes mistakes, and what we do is learn from them and work together to move forward. So nobody feels like if they get something wrong, they're hung out to dry. But this professional learning time is really valued in school, and it's constantly remodeled, revisited. It's linked to our school development plan, it's linked to people's professional review, which I'll talk about in a minute. And this time that we set aside is an investment and demonstrates our investment in the staff that we've got. So this notion of earned autonomy is about assuming people are doing a good job already, that they're working from a place of good. And so we ask the question, how do I know that? How do I know I'm good? And how do I know that I'm performing well? And what evidence have I got from my everyday practice? And that affirmation really helps people and gives them confidence. And again, that helps their well-being, because it makes them feel good about coming to work. That builds into the team subject self-evaluation, and it builds into the school development plan. And when I had my first year of opening, I was asked, how often do you do book scrutiny? And I thought that language was really interesting. How often do I do it as head? How often will I be scrutinising the books? And my response was, well, isn't that your job? As the class teacher, isn't it your job to scrutinise your books and look and see what's working, what isn't working, talk to your colleagues, compare, share, learn from each other, because that's how we're going to improve. And that notion of collective efficacy that we've seen from Hattie's research, we keep revisiting at school and looking at how we can work best together. So our subject self-evaluations happen each half term, and again we set time aside for this, and the subject teams sit together and they look at the learning, they look at student work in whatever that is, whether it's PE, DT, drama, English, maths. They talk to the students and find out what they think, and obviously we look at outcomes and progress as well, and we look at the data. And those subject self-evaluations done each half term then mean that the teams can spot things that aren't working quite so well, and they can make them better excuse me, next half term. Sorry, a little bit croaky today. And they're not bureaucratic, it's about being helpful and an important part of everyday life, again on the premise that people are doing a good job, and these will help them to get even better, and people get a sense of satisfaction out of knowing that they're improving. And then we talk about being life friendly rather than just family friendly. There are lots of events that happen in life that affect how people work in their school day. When we're advertising for roles, I always advertise them with flexibility is welcome. We want the right person for the job, rather than worrying too much about whether they want to work 5 days on a full-time basis. Our interview process is really transparent, and we ask a question during the interview about what they're hoping for, so that we can understand their situation. And that's not about the assessment part, that doesn't impact on whether or not they get the job, but it means that if we're offering a job to somebody, we can agree the parameters, and we can agree what will work for that person and for us as a school. We've got a really useful software package for our timetable, so that timetabling isn't a barrier. And that really helps us to timetable effectively for the number of staff that we've got that are working flexibly. And that transparency starts in the autumn term, where we ask people about their requests for the following year. And obviously they might change through the year, circumstances change, but that does give us a notion of what we're planning for next year and helps us just to sort out what we need in terms of recruitment. Because obviously you'll know your recruitment is a big part of what you do, and fitting that jigsaw together can be quite complex. But if you know in advance what people want, then it becomes much easier. We also would have a temporary flex. So sometimes there are things that happen in life and people just need that little bit of flexibility, whether it's somebody that's ill at home and they need to come in a bit later because they're managing that and juggling that. whether it's a bereavement. People need to feel that they can talk about those things in school and that they'll be listened to and heard, and that the school will support them and try and work around them as much as possible. There are many cases where people feel that they miss out on their child's special assembly or the Christmas play, and it really doesn't need to be like that. And obviously people can't go to every single thing that happens in life, but if you're open and honest and you trust that people make the right decision about what they do want to go to, then you can generally work around these things and make sure that people don't miss out on what's going on, and that you support them when times are tricky. So this has really worked for us in terms of our recruitment. Every year I receive somewhere in the region of 160, 170 applications for the 12.5 jobs that I advertise. I have very high rates of retention. As I said, a timetable package that supports the flexibility. This year we now have a wellbeing leader who is leading on all of this. And we have a wellbeing hub. And another important part of wellbeing is talking to the staff. So our staff voice is absolutely crucial. Twice a year we do that formally through Stakeholder Voice. There's regular informal staff voice. We have each year one anonymous staff survey. We have a staff focus group, a forum where people can come and discuss and share ideas, and lots of ways that staff can feel involved in decisions that are happening. And our staff appreciate what we're doing. As part of that Stakeholder Voice, 100% would recommend the workplace, and they feel that they have someone in school to talk to if there is an issue. And of course, there are things that they raise that we look at and things that they want to improve. And they will raise particular issues that are very person specific. And I always talk to the individual and try to understand their situation and try and resolve it. And that's why not all of the surveys are anonymous, because if they're anonymous, then I can't help and I can't change something that's perhaps more challenging. So I feel quite proud of how we've approached this from a holistic point of view. We do other things like breakfast boost with the bacon sandwiches every now and again, and Christmas cakes at Christmas time, and lots of little things. But those, I think, are the kind of icing on the cake, as it were. I think it's the fundamental practice of everyday life that really makes a difference to people's well-being, and that's what makes the difference. It's no good giving people cake when it's approaching Friday, or when it's approaching Christmas or half term, if the rest of their working week is absolutely rubbish. So if their general working life is really good, and then you give them a treat, then people feel really, really good about that, and they feel appreciated, and they feel recognised, and they feel heard. And I think that's absolutely crucial. I think I've probably overstayed my 10 minutes, Hannah, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So thanks so much. Just quickly, is that the things you just touched on there, how much of that is sort of replicated across the trust, and how much of it is sort of from your initiative of building that up?
Yeah, I think a lot of the schools do. So my school's the only one that has the professional learning time on a Wednesday, but we are looking at ways that we can include that in our new free schools that are coming online. And the other schools in the trust have their own different approaches to wellbeing, but I would say that it's a very high focus for our trust. And whilst the schools are all slightly different and approach it in a different way, it is about that holistic view.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sue. Yeah, please do put any questions that you have to Sue in the chat, and we can come to those afterwards. Gary, I'll hand over to you next.
Afternoon all. So I'm Gary Wilkie. I'm the CEO of Learning in Harmony Trust. We're not all special schools, and we're not just based in Newham. We've got 10 schools across Newham and Essex. I was a member of the Wellbeing Advisory Group that came up with the DfE Charter. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, and I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about how I think we bring that charter to life, and have done for quite a while in our schools. I haven't got a PowerPoint because I'm not very good at all at talking to PowerPoints. I'll talk about slide 10 when I'm on slide 2. So I'm just better off talking, basically. So the Wellbeing Charter, first of all, I think it is really important that people understand that the DfE Wellbeing Charter is not a tick box. It is not an investors in people. It's not one of those things that that you look back at what you've done in the past. The whole point of it is signing up to what you should be doing in the future, and signing up to a commitment to developing a long-term strategy for improving staff well-being for all. And it's really, really important that message gets out there. This is about us collectively. The group of people who are here clearly are committed to well-being. You wouldn't be here to do that, and if you didn't believe in that. Some of the things that are in the charter, I'm going to talk through and how we're doing it. I'm going to start with a line in it that says, give managers access to the tools and resources they need to support the well-being of those that they line manage. Because even though well-being is everybody's responsibility, and we have to do lots of work, I think, in terms of whose responsibility it is, and sharing responsibility, some of which I'll talk about in a minute. It doesn't work if it's not driven by the leaders, and the leaders don't believe it. I'm sure lots of people have used this phrase. I'm going to attribute it to Tim Brighouse. It's the leaders who make the weather, and the weather in the school is the culture in the school. And you've got to be, I believe, you've got to be strategic about culture, as strategic about culture as you are about every other element of school improvement. And we need to look both within and outside of the profession for that. So we've done a lot of work with all of our senior leaders in the trust, everybody from assistant head upwards, 65 odd people, in terms of learning about that deliberately, almost in a non-domain specific way. Whilst we might do lots of work in teaching and learning, etc., that's very domain specific. And doing lots of reading together on the work, for example, of Patrick Lencioni in terms of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, because actually that stuff in terms of the importance of genuine vulnerability is incredibly important. One of the best things that a leader can be doing to make sure that they show that well-being is important is to be vulnerable yourself. Something that I'm practicing, for example, as a real example of that, is I'm promising never, ever again, when I'm in front of a group of people or I do something and something goes wrong, to make the joke, oh, well done for spotting my deliberate mistake. No, that's not me showing my vulnerability. What I need to do is say, actually, I got that wrong there. That's okay. Mistakes are good. And actually talking about mistakes, the work of Amy Edmondson in terms of psychological safety is also incredibly important. That understanding of what a psychologically safe workspace is. Ironically, teachers are brilliant at creating a psychological workspace for their pupils. And one of the things that, an activity that we've done is actually is thinking about that. What is it that you did as a teacher that made the pupils feel psychologically safe? How can we scale that up? How can we change that to how we're making sure that there's a psychologically safe workspace? Sue talked about the importance of mistakes, and one of the things that Amy Edmondson talks about is how actually it's quite useful sometimes to define mistakes. There are not reading the manual mistakes, where you've just done something wrong which you should have done, but you didn't do. There are complex mistakes, because basically this is such a complex situation at the moment. It is no wonder that something has gone wrong. We've all absolutely had days like that. And there are mistakes which are really good because we set out to try and achieve something. We weren't sure whether it was going to work. It didn't work, but we learned from how it didn't work. It wasn't a mistake. So some of the reading from people like Edmondson and Lencioni are really, really important for us to take into our classrooms and for us to be able to model leadership. And I'll give you a couple more examples, which I think we live by as well. The work at the book by Kim Schott, Radical Candor, is also incredibly important. We need to make sure that our members of staff are clear where they stand. Actually, there's nothing that impacts your well-being worse than not knowing the level of accountability for something that you've got, the level of autonomy that you've got for doing something, and indeed whether you are going to be given the capacity to do it. You can't blame other people for their mistakes if you haven't been clear about that for them as a leader. And that radical candor and that clarity about that, incredibly important. And we're also heavily influenced by the work of David Marquet and his book, Turn the Ship Around. And one of our philosophies is very much the idea that the decision-making in our organisation should be made by the people who have the knowledge. What is the point in me sitting trying to make decisions that I do not have the information around? There's nothing more frustrating for people than a decision be made by somebody above them and somebody saying, but you're not making the decision with all of the information. And the idea of intent-based leadership, where actually people who have the information come to you and say, I intend to do this because of X, Y, and Z. And you say, that sounds like a really sensible idea, or you're questioning it. So it's really, really important that when we're thinking about preparing our leaders and preparing ourselves to be a leader, that we are looking at the best research that there is about creating climates from not just inside education, but outside education as well. A couple of other things that the Charter talks about. One is that clarity for people about responsibilities and where they sit. There is absolutely, I think, a responsibility to make sure that your well-being policy makes it clear what it is that is the responsibility of the governing body, the trustees, the leadership team, but of individuals, and of individuals to their own well-being, but also to the well-being of others, and having that very clear discussion. What is it that I'm responsible for? What am I accountable for in terms of well-being? And that's a challenging thing. It's incredibly challenging for people to take control of their own well-being. And we play games with this in terms of what can we do that actually makes a difference. One of the things that we did at one of our schools, actually, that you wouldn't do forever, but was really interesting, was we bought in some of those things that you get in IKEA and service stations, where you press, have you had a good day today? I'm sure you've all seen some of those things. And we put them on the exits of our schools. Now, it feeds data in, but the data is a waste of time, never looked at it. But what we did do was, part of the work we were doing with people was saying, if you press that button that says you've not had a very good day 3 days in a row, you've got to do something about it. That is your responsibility. We can only help if we know. Now, that's a bit of a gimmicky way of doing it, but that message to people that you can only do something about well-being, about the well-being, your own well-being, if it's clear, is also incredibly important. Another thing that I would really stress that the Wellbeing Charter talks about is the surveys, and Sue, I think, talked very clearly about the types of survey that they are. What I would urge people to do is not just make up your own one. There are some amazing examples out there, but there are also surveys which have nationally recognised data sets. It's no good. It isn't actually particularly useful for you to know which bits of well-being are the best in your school. What's important is that you know where you are relative to other people. But also, it's really important that you have somebody to interpret that data for you. So the school that one of the founding schools of the Trust, Sheringham, where I was the head, when we did the Education Support Partnership Positive Wellbeing Survey, which is just a fantastic tool, The key thing that we got out of that was the support we got in analysing that data. So we had data that showed people buying into the culture off the scale, people trusting in school leaders off the scale, people feeling that they were involved in decision making was kind of medium in the national data. Of course, what do you do? What do all school leaders do? What do most people do? You seek the negative things. But actually, what was so important was we had someone to interpret that and say, these guys believe in you. They believe in the culture. They have the opportunities to get involved if they want to. That is not a problem for you because of the other data. But if you don't have someone to interpret the information that you've got and it's not norm referenced, you can think that you're getting information about your workforce, but it's not over valid. Just as a last bit, a last thing in terms of this bit from me, I quite like the way that Sue, you ended with a few bits of stuff. Having acknowledged that it's not stuff that makes the difference, it's the philosophy and it's your sense of culture. But it's always not a bad idea to have a couple of stuff things to take away from a meeting like this. So I'll do a cake-based one as well, or a food-based one for the staff room as well. A brilliant thing that we did at Sheringham is we moved away from, I'm sure many schools have the tradition of people bringing in stuff staff bringing in stuff when it's their birthday for other staff. It's in loads of staff rooms all over the country. We changed it so that on a particular day of every month, all of the people who had their birthday that month bought food in. And so everybody celebrated the birthday together. So that meant that the lowest paid members of staff weren't under the pressure to bring in donuts for everybody. If they were bringing in a little thing, it was all part of the whole feast for everybody. So a celebration day, people like to do it. There's a quick stuff thing for you, but it's far more than that. It's about a way of being, and the leaders absolutely are the people who set the weather.
Thank you very much, Gary. I'm just standing in for Hannah as she's having a few internet issues, but thank you very much for that. We'll pass over now to Steve, if you're okay to talk, Steve.
Yeah, sure. So this is going to be a bit different to the two presentations that you've heard, because I'm actually going to ask you to do something, and all you need is a pen and a piece of paper. So let me just share my screen. We'll get underway. Okay, so we've heard from Sue and Gary how important it is that staff well-being is prioritised, and the mental health of the children starts with the mental health of the staff. If the staff are in a bad place, the children can't be in a good place. And I just want to play a very short, it's less than 2 minutes, a very short excerpt from an interview that I did with Jeremy Hannay, who is head teacher of 3 Bridges Primary School in Southall, London. And I'll give you a bit of context after the interview. But I asked him to start with, I asked him how he would characterize his school and his leadership of the staff. The sound quality isn't brilliant. I've turned up my own sound as high as I can, so you might have to strain to listen a bit.
Maybe what's different about 3 Bridges, or how it is that maybe things are slightly unique here. I would say that there is a really heavy focus on ensuring that the adults in the building are well taken care of. And that goes against the grain, I think, of some of my colleagues, perhaps, because lots of my colleagues are saying, we got to put pupils first. Put the children first. That's going to be at the center of all decision making. And I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm suggesting is counter to that message. My belief and my experience is that in order, I mean, well, I guess it's simply put like this. There is no pupil well-being, there is no pupil achievement, there's no pupil collaboration, there's no pupil collective responsibility, there's no pupil anything until the adults have experienced that first. I think that's, to me, it's quite a simple equation. If we're not putting our adults in a soil that is nutrient rich, that will allow them to flourish into whomever they want to be as an educator, they have no chance of doing that effectively and sustainably in the classroom with children. Because sometimes, I mean, very often as a child, you have to watch somebody love something before you can learn to love it yourself, like they're showing you the way. And that is an ingredient, that is a nutrient that gets overlooked in many schools. That we need to make sure as leaders that we take care of the people, we take care of our people. It's a crucial element. Maybe what's different about Three Bridges.
So just a bit of context about Jeremy's school. You can see the descriptors on the left there. So this isn't a school in a leafy suburb, and yet they are achieving astonishing results. And Jeremy puts that down to the way that he nurtures the staff. And his school has no formal lines of accountability. So no book scrutiny, no marking policy, no observations, no learning walks, no formal performance management. That doesn't mean to say that none of this takes place. It takes place in a culture where staff are given control and responsibility for their own learning journey. So, for example, there are no hierarchical observations where Jeremy or the senior staff go into lessons and then give feedback, but the teachers are in pairs or threes and do what is known, I'm sure you're familiar with it, as lesson study. And what they do is they talk between themselves and they say, I'm really happy with something that's going on in my room. I'm doing X with the children and it's going really well. Do you want to pop in and see what's happening? And alternatively, one of the pair or the three might say, I'm trying something with my class and it's just not working. Would you mind coming in and giving me your feedback? So one of the things that was said to Jeremy, I think he's been in the school now for 8 years and 7 of those or 6 of those have been as head teacher. One of the things that was said to him when he was talking to other head teachers was, well, Jeremy, it's all very nice to have a happy, clappy school, but what will happen when Ofsted come? And that's what happened when Ofsted came. The school got outstanding in every category. The results of the children's SATs were excellent, and neither he nor his staff put the children through a mock SAT exam. What they do is they take the pressure off. They obviously teach them how to answer different kinds of questions, but they take the pressure off and they just say, when you're doing the SAT, just do your best. Okay, we know that you can work really well. We know that you love school. Just do what you can. And astonishingly, the results are better than many comparable schools in much better catchment areas. So I guess my question would be, well, if this is all great, why hasn't the DfE selected Jeremy's school as a case study and promote them off the scale? And unfortunately, my cynical view is that the DfE, that doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative is that you only get results by measuring, by collecting data, by judgment, by criticism. And Jeremy refuses to do any of that. So he was very brave, I think. He put his head above the parapet and said, I'm not interested in the fancy badge. I'm not interested what banner goes outside my school, because I'm not going to put a banner outside it anyway. So let them come and let them make a judgment. And that was the result. So this slide, you'll get a copy of the slide. This slide just picks out what Jeremy has said in that interview. And his interview is chapter 7 in the book. It's virtually verbatim. And what I'm particularly pleased about in terms of this book is that the majority of it, about 80%, is written by head teachers, by leaders, by wellbeing leads about their own schools. And what is great about it is that none of the schools says we've got it cracked. You know, wellbeing for staff, yeah, we've sorted that now. They're all very authentic, they're all very honest, they're all very humble about the progress that they've made. And what they do is they set success side by side with some of the challenges they've had and some of the issues they still need to resolve. And that's the spirit in which Sue wrote her chapter. And also the other thing that was remarkable was that none of these, I didn't get a number of schools and then filter. When I asked schools to participate, I simply said to them, if you're interested in writing about well-being authentically and honestly, then great, I'll include you in the book. And 32 schools offered to write and are included in the book. And particularly because this happened during COVID, it was a remarkable achievement for those schools to write the chapters. So you might come across a chapter which is in your phase or your type of school, but you'll find in there some things that won't work in yours. However, if you dip in and out of most of the chapters, you will be able to assemble a collection of wellbeing strategies that actually do work and have been tried. And also it will help you to avoid going down perhaps a path that isn't going to work because the schools tell you what doesn't work. So now I'm going to ask you, that's the kind of context. What I'm going to ask you now to do is a very easy exercise, very quick. You can do it in your own school. So the person that nobody has heard of in education, which I think everybody needs to hear about, is Christina Maslach. Christina Maslach has been working on occupational burnout since the 1970s, and she's regarded as a world expert. Strangely, none of her work has been applied very much at all, either here or in the States where she lives, in the education system. It's mainly been applied to other workplaces. Oops, sorry. Lost it now. Dear. Well, I'm not sure why that's jumped. Okay, so these are 6 factors that Christina Maslach identifies as leading to occupational burnout. And you can read them for yourself, but I'll just highlight them. So first of all, work overload. Work overload is the most common factor that teachers tell us has an impact on their well-being. Then a lack of control, a lack of reward. So somebody else is telling you all the time what to do, and that's typically in schools that have good well-being. They will say, well, we're always being told by the government to do X, Y, and Z. We're not given any much professional respect. A lack of reward could be pay, but actually being told that you're doing a good job is much more of a motivator. A lack of community. So in schools where well-being is poor, teachers work individually. They keep their classroom doors shut. They don't have lunch with others. They take their sandwiches into their own classroom. They go into the canteen, get lunch, walk out of the canteen and eat it by themselves. And then a lack of fairness. So in schools which don't have very good well-being, teachers will say, what is the point of me applying for that job? Because I know who's going to get it. You know, their name's written all over it. I'm not going to waste my time doing it. Now, whether that's a real whether that's a reality or just a perception, the fact is that if the perception exists, it creates a reality. And then finally, a conflict of values. So you'll see on Twitter, if you're an active tweeter like me, that in the education world, a lot of teachers who want to leave teaching, both here in the US, say, this is not why I went into teaching. These are not the values that I want to espouse. This is not why I this is not why I applied. This is not why I trained. And because of that conflict of values, I've got to get out of the system. So I've just put down here in this slide, again, you'll get this after tonight, but you'll see on the left again, the factors. Now, these factors are not in any order. So what I would like you to do quickly on your piece of paper is thinking about your school. It's the organization that we're focusing on now. Which factors do you think are most prevalent in causing issues which might lead to burnout? So, for example, in your school, is it work overload that is the most important factor? Now, what I'm going to do after you've, well, actually, I'll explain what I would like you to do, and then you can just do it after you've put the categories in order. When you put the categories in order, I want you to give each category a mark out of 10. So a mark of 1 would be that this is the worst work overload I've ever experienced, and 10 would be this is the kind of work load that I can manage easily, so it's not affecting me. So 1 is a work overload that is affecting well-being, and 10 is work that is not affecting well-being. And then just put a quick number into that category. So I'll leave you to do that. If you can do it as quickly as possible, what I found is that if you think about it too long, it becomes more difficult to do. So it's kind of an instant impression. Not sure why this presentation is jumping, so I'll just keep my eye on it to make sure it stays on one slide. Must be some automation that I've set by accident. Okay. So you might not have had time to do those 2 tasks, but you might have had time to put them in order. Now, if you are struggling to put them in order because in your school these factors are not in play, then that tells you something about the state of well-being in your school. If you ask your staff to do it and they come up with different versions, a range of different versions, then perhaps well-being is seen more of as an individual response rather than an organizational response. But if you ask your staff to do it and they all put lack of control, or mainly lack of control, in the first 3, then maybe that's something that you would like to address. And this slide gives you an idea about how you can use this personally. So you can apply this to your own personal life or your personal professional life. You can do it very quickly. Write a date on the piece of paper you're using, take a photograph of the piece of paper and say, right, I'm going to come back to this and do it next half term. And what is happening? Is it very much the same? Is it getting worse or is it getting better? So you can use it as a kind of a dual evaluation, one of your school and one of your own personal response. So I'll just, I'm going to finish now. There is a slide that you can use personally as well, which I've adapted from both the work of Maslach and somebody called Freudenberger, who Maslach based her work on. And what this does is it has a set of descriptors which start with these stages are the stages of Freudenberger's burnout development. And you'll see that at the top, they shaded green, then yellow, and then light red, and then dark red. And in this area here, if somebody is assessing themselves, evaluating themselves as being in this red area, then they're in serious difficulty of burnout, but more importantly, their mental health is not in a good place. So the value of this is that if leaders use it with someone who is struggling, then again, you can plot their struggles over time, you can put in intervention, and then you can ask them to do it again after a period of time. And this will act as a helpful tool in supporting them. So at the end of the PowerPoint, again, you're going to get the slides. There are 3 slides with books on school wellbeing and mental health. All of them, I can't say I've read all of them. I have all of them in my bookcase and I have dipped into them. And they're all excellent books. And if you'd like to get in touch with me after this discussion, then those are my contact details. I now run a school membership called Teach Well Toolkit, which provides a range of wellbeing services to schools, including a program which helps them to develop a culture of staff wellbeing and mental health. And that program was developed as a response or as a result of the chapters that were written in the book. Okay, so I'll stop sharing and then we're into any questions, I believe.
Brilliant, thank you, Steve. Apologies that I had to drop out there. Internet is playing up a little bit this afternoon, so hopefully I'm with you now till the end of the session. Thank you all. I found those really, really interesting. I think lots of kind of crossover and agreement on some of the key points there. One thing I sort of wanted to pick up was around points that you all made on the importance of showing vulnerability as a leader and sort of setting yourself as an example. I wonder if you could just sort of talk, particularly Sue and Gary, in your positions, as to how you sort of make sure that you're living by the values that you set, and particularly Sue, obviously for new free school head teachers, when in those first few years when you really are, you know, quite on your own in a lot of instances, with a really small team supporting you. I know delegation can be a real challenge for leaders. How you make sure that you're not sort of taking it all on yourself, you know, it's not working at the expense of yourself and your own well-being. I'll start with you, Sue, and then Gary, if you want to chip in anything afterwards.
Yeah, I think you've raised a couple of good points there, Hannah, in terms of delegation. You'll all know as new school leaders that when you are starting out, you do everything from emptying the bins, changing the toilet rolls, to managing the budget, managing staff, and everything in between. And I think that notion of delegating is really important. But if you've created a culture where staff are have autonomy and have the ownership and the responsibility just to get on and do things, and they're not fearful for doing something and then getting it wrong, then people feel quite happy to step in and to do things beyond what might be in their normal job description, which is pretty standard practice in any free school. So yeah, it's about that safe space that Gary was talking about earlier. And if you're expecting people to take on jobs, perhaps that it might even be a little thing that you want them to do that they haven't done before, the fact that they can take it on and do it, and if it's not perhaps quite done as you might have expected, that everybody wraps around them and fixes it and puts it right. And that's where having that shared sense of collective efficacy is really, really important. What was your other point? Sorry, Hannah, I know you asked two questions in one there.
No, I think that's mostly covered it. Yeah, it's just that we're saying, you know, in terms of your own, you know, how you make sure that you're, prioritizing your own kind of well-being and sort of setting that as an example to
I work really hard on that, and it is really difficult to do, particularly over the last 2 years, when, you know, there's nothing like being a new school leader. The fact that everything changes every year makes the job even harder than being a head in a established school. Then you throw COVID into the mix and everything else that comes along. It is a really tough job. So I try really hard to role model it in terms of the hours that I'm physically in the building, because I think it's a really bad example to set that if I'm always the last one out, that sets a really bad example to everybody else. So there are days when I leave in good time. I also don't play the who's worked the longest hours game that a lot of staff rooms have. So when people say, oh, how was your evening? How was your weekend? Oh, I worked all last night and all over the weekend. I don't play that game, and I will say, I had a lovely weekend with my family, thank you very much. And oh yes, I did this at the weekend and I did that last night, and trying to demonstrate that it is okay to give that answer. Because if I give the answer, oh, I've been working all hours and I've been working all weekend, then that's giving permission to everybody else to do that. If I'm actively saying that I have a life outside of school, then that gives permission for other people to do the same. And I think that's really important. And when there are times that I'm under pressure, as is inevitable in headship, I do try and make sure that I'm not then sharing that with other staff, so that they're not necessarily seeing some of that, which you could argue is not always a good thing. But you know, the balance is I try and make sure that I'm role modeling good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, have you got anything to sort of add to that?
Yeah, I'm a great believer in the power of language, not the power of language in a superficial way. It's very easy to say things and not do them. But actually, if you say things and mean them and follow them through, it can really make a difference. So I am forever using the phrase presumption for partnership. That's a key phrase that we have in our trust. Presumption for partnership between people in each, from one classroom to the next, but from one school to another. And I think that just me repeating that message is really important, because it helps people to realise they are not on their own, and in fact they should always be sense checking what they're doing with other people. And I think in terms of my own well-being, one of the things that makes you happy and other people happy is to smile, and to smile at people, and to say hello to people. You know, you don't have to fake saying hello to people, even if they're annoying you. You don't have to fake smiling at people, even if they're annoying you. But that makes a difference to your well-being as well as theirs. And it's a little thing, but I really think it makes a difference, not just to other people, but to me as well.
Yeah, it's very true. All the sort of science of, you know, fake it till you make it, and actually it does work, doesn't it? Absolutely. Brilliant. Steve, you got anything to add just on that point there?
Well, one of the anecdotes that I frequently tell is about Vic Goddard, who is head teacher at Passmore's in Essex. Vic was the first head teacher to allow cameras in his school, and he was the first school in the series Educating Essex, which became rather controversial. What Vic does is, I mean, he's loved by the staff, and staff don't leave his school because he's created a community. And what he says is that he bases his leadership on authenticity. And he gives an example of, he went home for Christmas one year and was absolutely knackered. And he spent, he says, 2 weeks virtually on the sofa, eating really bad food. And when he came back, he'd put on 1/2 stone. And he said to the staff, he said, he had a briefing, he said to the staff, look, I've been really stupid. Okay, I should have done more exercise. I didn't. I sat on the sofa. I was binge watching box sets, eating from the Quality Street. He said, and look, I put on 1/2 stone. So he said, I'll tell you what I'd like you to do. When you see me around the school, if I've got a chocolate bar or a biscuit in my hand, you don't need to say anything, just come up to me and take it out of my hand. And what that does is it gives permission to, younger staff to be able to do that. And actually they got a kick out of watching him on the corridors to make sure he didn't do it. So I think, his philosophy is that leaders need community, they need help, they need support. And I put into the box a question: when was the last time you as a leader asked for help from an early career teacher? And if we have a hierarchy where it's always the staff who are less experienced asking for help from someone immediately above them in the hierarchy, then that's fine to a certain extent. But if it ends up so the leader is supporting everybody else, but they're not getting any support themselves, that's a really awful place to be. And it's a recipe, as I pointed out, for burnout. So I think what schools in the book try to do is they try to build a community where anybody can ask for help from anyone else, including the head teacher asking for help from an NQT. Yes. Just another illustration from Vic. He came in one day, held the briefing, he could hardly talk, he wasn't really very well. And he said, look, I'm going to struggle to get through the day. If you see me walking around the corridor and I don't have a drink in my hand, either water or a cup of tea, and you have time, would you mind just going to get me a drink? And the first person to do that was an NQT. So it's building a community which cuts through the hierarchical expectations, where we're all in this together and we all need help at one time or another.
Yeah, absolutely. Go and ask for cups of tea is the takeaway. Seeing Gary and Sue nodding up there. So I'm just going to come back to the question that Kerry asked earlier about sort of flexible working within schools. I think it is, a conversation that you know, schools are starting to have, but yeah, just to hear a bit more about sort of how you make it work in practice.
Yeah, as I said earlier on, it is about understanding where the person is coming from, why they need that flex. Because somebody might come to you saying, oh, I only want to work 3 days a week, but actually it might be about something else that they haven't actually thought that there could be another solution. So if you understand why people need a bit of flex, you can often put a solution to them that works better for them and better for school. And so that I put it there in the answer, it is about balance, it is about compromise. And people need flexibility for all sorts of reasons, and sometimes particularly when it's a temporary thing and they're under particular pressure. I don't know, they got a poorly family member and they're struggling to get them to appointments or something, but it's not going to last forever. They can't always see that light at the end of the tunnel, and think, oh, I've got to drop my days a week because I can't cope and I can't do it. But actually, when you sit down and talk to them and you know that it's only going to last for a couple of months, there's some temporary solutions that you can put in place for people, and they don't necessarily want or need a long-term solution. So it's about constant communication with people and what will work for them, but also what will work for school, and being realistic, because there are some jobs that just don't work on a part-time or job share basis because they create more problems than they solve. Safeguarding, for example, if you were sharing that out amongst several people, I think that would be really, really challenging. But there are other jobs where it wouldn't matter so much if somebody did finish at 3 o'clock because they want to pick their child up down the road at 3:15. So it is about looking at each and every individual circumstance, what will work, what won't work. Trying not to see it as a barrier and not to see it as, oh, we don't want to set a precedent here, do we? You know, which I just think is an awful response to a question about flex. Because generally speaking, you can make it work.
Can I come in? Is that all right, Hannah?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm very obsessed by the GROW model as a problem-solving model, and within that, thinking of every single option, however stupid it is. I think with flexible working, we seem to have blinkers, and as you alluded to in terms of this kind of thing. So, no, I've had members of staff, for example, on 0.9 who started at 10 o'clock on a Monday and ended at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. It was the best thing in the world for them. Now, I doubt there are many people at many schools who have that kind of thing, and that's because of my obsession of I am going to try and get as many bloody apparently stupid ideas first before we make a decision on this.
And that's why you've got to understand the circumstances, isn't it, Gary? Because if somebody's saying to you, all I want is just to be able to do this 1 day a week, and actually I only need 2 hours to do that. Now, why not let that happen? You know, that you'd be a fool not to enable that to happen. You know, I've got people who just want that 1 day a week pickup. I've got other people who want a whole day because there's something that they need to do on that whole day. I've got a music teacher who's a performer, and so he wants to do his practicing and performing on that 1 day. I've got other people who've got regular childcare commitments, so they're more likely to do a 2.5 day or a 3 day a week. But it, like you say, Gary, is about looking at all of those options, and to look at those options, you've got to understand the reasons that people need that flexibility.
Thank you. One other question, and something that you sort of touched on, Sue and Steve, in terms of sort of changing needs of schools and sort of staff wellbeing over time. So can you talk a bit about how it's changed for you sort of since opening the school, and as your staff cohort's built up, kind of how that's changed over time?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep looking at what you're doing, because what works for you when you're in your first year of opening might not necessarily work still when you're in your year 4. Because for me, I had 12.5 teachers, full-time equivalent in year 1. I've now got over 100 staff and 930 children. So it is about constantly revisiting about what works, what are you doing now that shouldn't be there, what do you need to do now to make it work on a bigger scale. And those schools that are scaling up, like I had to, need to think about that sustainability. and whether there are things that you were doing that you now don't need to do, or whether things that you did originally, you've got to scale up to make it work for the larger numbers that you're now working with. And I know that's something that you'll be really conscious of as new school leaders, but I think with wellbeing, very often there can be things that you can stop doing because you don't need to do them anymore. And somebody asked me earlier about time and how do you fit all of that time in? And it is, I look at the time budget regularly to see what's in that budget, what's on that list of things that we expect staff to do, what can be dropped, what needs to stay in, what can go, what's reasonable, what's unreasonable. And what you find is when you invest in your staff and you have got that really strong community, Steve was talking earlier there about people eating together, all our staff all eat together because they want to.
Exactly.
It's a nice thing to do. People will give far more than you ask them to do. And actually we stick quite well beneath our 1265, and we also have really generous non-contact time. And again, that's an important feature of school because people have the time to do what they need to do, and they feel valued about that. So that sense of community is really strong.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, just on that, very quickly on that point, it's a self-evident point, but that if you're in a school where well-being of the staff is not considered at all, then you end up paying a lot out in supply because staff are then off with stress. Some of them long term, some of them want to leave, most of them probably want to leave. So investing in well-being will save on your supply bill. Yeah. And you know, the cost of investing in well-being against the cost of a member of staff being absent for 6 months, for example, there's just no equation. So with schools that aren't predisposed to look at well-being, because I think it's a bit, you know, a bit weak and a bit nebulous, they quite often are persuaded when you present the figures for how much schools are spending on supply for absent staff. And that also applies to business managers and finance officers. So if they can't be persuaded one way, they would try to persuade them another.
I think, Steve, the key point here that we're all saying is that this stuff doesn't happen by accident.
No.
You've got to be strategic about it, and you've got to do it with rigour. And I mean, I know Jeremy and have been to Three Bridges as well, and I think that the thing that was missing a little bit in what you were saying is there is so much rigour and so much strategy in what Jeremy does, and it's very, very easy to see a short clip and think, oh, that's easy, but it's absolutely not. It's totally planned and totally strategic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you all. Coming to the end of the session, and I hope that's been useful for all in attendance. We're just going to pop up a quick poll for those that are still on the call, just to let us know how you found today's session, and also if you'd be interested in further conversations on this topic, because I do think we could quite happily go on, I'm sure, but obviously in line with the theme of today, we'll let you all get on with your evenings. Thank you again to our speakers, Steve, Sue and Gary. And yes, thank you, Sue. We will be putting out slides as well as the reading lists of all the books mentioned. And we'll make sure as well that if anybody does want to get in touch with any of our three speakers today, we can facilitate that as well. So if you'd like to continue the conversation sort of with a bit more about your context, happy to facilitate that.